Hey everyone, it's Scott from Wildlife Inspired. Today's video a little different. I'm not going to tell you about editing, or wildlife photography, or a gear review, or software. I'm actually going to tell you something that's a little personal, by far the most personal video I've ever made, but I am hoping that you will watch it. Give me 5 or 10 minutes. You may find it interesting because there's a wildlife component. You may find it more interesting because it's just a strange story. Maybe you have some interest in health or you can relate to this, but I was wondering if wildlife tried to kill me. See, about a week ago, a little over a week, I had a stroke. Now, watching this video, that might be hard to understand, and at the time I thought maybe something like a mini stroke was possible, and you may be wondering the same thing. I don't have any outward symptoms, my speech is okay, my cognition's okay. But I did go to the ER and I was diagnosed with a moderate stroke. I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. It's very curious to me. I think you're going to find it interesting. Let me tell you how it happened. Acute dizziness spell, intense nausea. I slept on it. Didn't go to the hospital right away. The next morning it happened again. And fortunately I did go to the ER and was admitted. I went through all the tests. Everything was normal. Had a couple more episodes at the hospital, and the only symptom that I exuded was this intense dizziness and nausea. Doctors were trying to figure out what happened. They ran me through some more tests to outrule a stroke, and in that process they came back. And there was no hesitation. They showed me the following picture. In that picture, the series of pictures, it was pretty evident that there was a stroke. And in my case, a stroke that affected a specific part called the cerebellum. Now, the cerebellum controls motion and balance. It is not affecting my cognition, speech, or motor skills. And I'm very fortunate in that way. I will tell you at the time, I did not feel very fortunate, and I am still at risk of a reoccurrence. And so that's on my mind. There's more to the story, and I want to tell you a little bit more about the diagnosis and how it happened, because I think you'll find this a little bit interesting. At the end, I'm also going to tell you how this might pertain to wildlife photography, and that there's a chance that all of this was a result of wildlife photography. As the doctors were reviewing the MRI and the MRA, by the way, I'm not a doctor. I'm going to refer to what doctors have told me and what others have told me in the medical profession. They have told me, my neurologist said, you are kind of a genetic anomaly in that you've got one vertebral artery that is much larger than the other. Vertebral arteries running through the back of your neck, aortids running through the front of your neck. The vertebral arteries are two arteries that merge into one, and it's not uncommon for one to be a little larger. Think a ratio of 60-40, maybe 70-30. Genetically, you may find people off that chart, and I was actually, from what they can tell, I was probably more 80-20, 90-10, meaning I had one very large vertebral artery and one very, very, very small one. Now that in itself is not enough to cause a stroke. The strokes can be caused by many, many factors. Clots, hole in the heart is a common one. There's hundreds of factors. And when they did the test, because ultimately they need to find out why I had this stroke so that we prevent it from happening again, heart looked great. All of my statistics were fairly normal. I'm a fairly healthy 52-year-old male. And so they did a little bit more research and they started to look at the veins in my neck, and that's when they discovered that one was much smaller. And as they eliminated everything else, the doctors came up with a theory. This doctor's pretty confident in his diagnosis in that the smaller vein in my neck suffered what's called a dissection. I'm going to explain real briefly what he explained to me. I'm not a medical professional. If you've got a comment to make down there, feel free. Just understand, do it with a grain of salt, knowing that I'm not a medical profession. But I do listen very well, and I like to consider myself fairly intelligent. I study a lot, I read a lot, and I've read a lot about this. So we're going to imagine I've got one of these full size and one of these tiny little arteries back there. I may use vein and artery just out of a memory loss, but it is an artery. The small artery has 3 layers, primary layers. There's an outer layer that's fairly tough, a middle layer, and a thinner inner layer. In my case, a dissection could be a disruption of any of those layers, but they believe in mine, the inner layer, I want you to imagine this is the inner layer of my artery, and that something happens and it breaks off. It breaks off and causes maybe a flap or some kind of disruption to the artery. And remember, mine's small to begin with. This can be created by a lot of factors, things like blood pressure. I don't have extremely high blood pressure, but that's a factor. It can be caused by a traumatic event, a car accident. I've had sports injuries, something hits you in the neck, and it creates this disruption there, which causes this dissection. Again, fortunately, mine is only, they believe, to the inner lining. It didn't appear to have an external effect. In other words, it wasn't a mass event. That lining now, they believe, created some fluid buildup there or some clotting that formed there that wouldn't have normally formed if everything was healthy. That clot, they believe, broke off, and because the artery is so small, it caused some damage. I don't know what the percentage is. I'm going to show you this picture again. When they show me this picture, I wasn't really sure exactly what it meant other than the white is bad. And the white is actually tissue that is no longer there. It's there, it's dead. It doesn't work. I also didn't realize it doesn't regenerate. So your body will eventually figure out how to compensate. I'm hopeful for that. This is the area of the cerebellum, so it's motion, balance, and that's what my symptoms were. Extreme vertigo and nausea. The prognosis is fairly positive, so I'm glad about that. What I was curious about is how did it happen? Now, in my case, I didn't have a traumatic event. My blood pressure probably didn't warrant something unhealthy to happen there. The third factor that was explained to me, or one of the factors that was explained to me, is just head position. And I thought, well, yeah, that makes sense. Like, have I put my head into unusual positions? So, had my hair washed. Somebody sent me an article about freak accidents that happened at the hairdressers. And one of them was strokes that are happened when you're getting your hair washed. You've got your back of your neck tilted back on a hard surface. I had my hair cut a couple weeks ago. I like to stretch my neck. Get sore sometimes, so I lean over the couch, I stretch my neck back. Not a healthy position. I believe they call that hyperextension. For those of you thinking of doing that, don't do that. You could be in a yoga class. You could be doing wrestling. You could just have these weird head positions where you're stretching back a lot. And then I thought of another time that I stretch a lot, that I'm in a weird position, and that's when I'm laying flat to do duck photography, which I did all of January, February, March into April. I was in April in Utah doing a lot of prone photography for stillbirds where I was laying on my stomach for hours with my head tilted back. And I thought, nobody knows how long that dissection has been there, but I thought, wouldn't it be weird? Maybe not weird, ironic, if wildlife photography created this. Did wildlife try to kill me? I said to some friends once at dinner, we were having drinks and I was meeting with people I didn't know, and somehow we got on the topic of death, and I was saying, you know, if I ever die, I'll be happy if I'm mauled by a bear. I don't know that I really want to be mauled by a bear. It probably isn't a pleasant experience, but the point was, I'm going to try to do what I love to do safely, and whatever happens, happens. That's kind of the philosophy I had at the time. I don't know that I've changed that. I still love to garden. I love taking bird pictures. I love being in nature. I don't think I can change that for anything. I do know that I'll probably have to modify some of my behaviors. Prone photography is going to be tough. It leads me to some other thoughts and discussions and topics of conversation. And it's made me think a lot. So I want to say thank you. I've had hundreds of people reach out to me on social media and Instagram, sending me well wishes, asking how I was doing. In this video is in part to answer some of those questions. A lot of people asked how I'm doing, what happened. I thought maybe I'll make a video about it and explain to everybody. I don't know that it'll help anybody in the future other than a reminder that life is short. Do what you love to do. You never know what's going to happen next. I expected to live well into my 80s or 90s. I've had that mindset since I was young. I've always been healthy, almost never been sick. 30 years, I never missed a day of work for being sick. And now I'm out of work for a couple weeks because I just need to rest and heal. That's how wildlife. So wildlife might have tried to kill me. We'll never know the answers, never know exactly what happens. They still don't know exactly what's going on in my body, but that is the best diagnosis and one of the possible causes. So I just want to thank everybody again for your well wishes. This is not the typical content of my channel. If you are interested more in how-to product reviews and software, I do all that. Feel free to subscribe to the channel. I hope I get some new viewers from this one and some people just kind of curious about the topic. Anything you want to say down in the comments, I'm going to read them all as I usually do. So feel free to use the comment section for this one. But I do appreciate you watching this one. A little bit different for me, but I felt like maybe I just needed to put it out there. So thanks for your support. Thanks for your well wishes. And as always, I hope, probably in this case, maybe I pray, that we can continue to find inspiration in wildlife together.